Sparano joins us. Hey, that was a lot of bad news, huh?
Yeah, it was, and I don't think it's going to stop anytime soon. You know, despite all the complexity that we just heard about how the economy works, I think it's really very simple. It boils down to, like, using a personal credit card, building the debt, continuing to build your debt, and you can't pay for it. Eventually, if you're a private citizen, you have to declare bankruptcy.
Right.
And nations are not immune to that either, finally, if the spending keeps up.
Right. But I think what interests me is that both parties, I mean, Democrats and Republicans, they're all being fiscally irresponsible in this thing.
Well, sure they are, because they're all catering to their own constituencies,
right.
And they all have their hands in the pork barrel,
right.
which gets bigger and bigger. And you know, again, like the report said, it's short-term political gain
right.
for long-term destruction of the economy.
Right. And plus,
you know, and Trump's cutting taxes. You know, this is similar. You know, for those who may have short memories, this is similar to what Reagan did in his first term. And that was the baloney about trickle-down economy.
Right.
In other words, that, you know, if you give corporations tax breaks, they're going to use that money to create jobs and invest in new ventures and all that.
Right.
Baloney. You know, what happened then and what's happening now is the corporations are using that tax windfall to buy back their own stock, which is very good if you're a big stockholder, very good if you're CEO,
right.
whose bonuses are tied
right.
to the increase in the stock price. But, you know, if you're a poor working stiff without a job and his job has gone overseas, you're out of luck.
Right, right. Well, you know,
and what happened there was eventually, you know, after Reagan declared trickle-down tax cuts would be great, best thing since sliced bread, eventually his successor, Bush Sr., had to raise taxes. And that's what got him defeated in the next election, because he said, read my lips, no new taxes, and he was forced to raise taxes.
Yeah. Well, you know, the other thing that they don't really get into that much in that last piece is that it's, you know, we're going to be owned by foreign nations. I mean, much of that interest and debt is going to be owned by China, for example.
That's another thing. Now, China, you know, this is a Frankenstein monster of our own creation. Not only is it benefiting from the trade deficit, from having all our jobs and technology shipped over to them, but it's also gaining with all the interest that we pay to them because they're holding our debt.
Right.
So, you know, the monster keeps increasing in size, and again, we're the ones who created that Frankenstein monster that is now turning against us, not just economically, but now it's becoming a military threat.
Yeah, wow. And I mean,
you know, another thing, Ken, a pet peeve of mine.
Yeah.
Entitlements. You know, why are the Democrats buying into that term, entitlements? Social Security is not an entitlement. We pay for that out of every paycheck. We pay for it during our entire working careers. And the Republicans are dissing it by calling it an entitlement, as if we're begging for a handout, and the government is graciously giving us a handout. That's not the case at all. And the stupid Democrats bought into that term. The Republicans came out with that, created that term entitlement, and the Democrats didn't say, well, we're not going to call it entitlement because it's not an entitlement, but they went along with it. I mean, that's how unsavvy the Democrats are, especially with the really skillful manipulation of public thought and definitions that the Republicans are so good at.
Yeah, I agree. All right, sir. Well, we'll talk tomorrow.
What's going on? If we have one more minute, what's going on with it? You know, so far we're floating this debt because the day of reckoning hasn't come yet, and part of that is because we're able to print money, as the report noticed, and the other countries are still buying our debt and going along with that because the U.S. dollar is still the reserve currency. But China, Russia, and other nations are already trying to establish their own reserve currency. If that becomes a reserve currency other than the U.S. dollar, we are really in trouble.
Wow.
So that's my spiel for today, Ken.
All right. Talk to you tomorrow.
All right.
Okay, bye-bye. That was a long-time Fox 40 News anchor Larry Sparano and investigative journalist Larry Sparano, and he has a website called On Target with Larry Sparano, which you should definitely check out.